Chapter 4. So when I came back to Europe from visiting my aunt and uncle, where they turned me on to the fruitarianism, I went to London to work for a few months, and I had roommates there that in the apartment I was living in London, and I started fasting. And I started off, my first fast was on fruit juice, and I actually went for 3 weeks with nothing but fruit juice. And it really brought up a lot of issues for me because at that point, I realized that I had spent my whole life obsessing over food, that food was my entertainment. When I was eating breakfast, I was thinking about what I was going to eat for lunch. And when I was eating dinner, I was thinking about what I was going to eat for breakfast. And I occupied my mind with food nonstop. Luckily, I had a good metabolism and I ate healthy, so I still stayed thin. But I obsessed over food, and I had no idea about that until I started fasting. And at first, I felt really good. I mean, first few days you feel crappy, and then you get into a rhythm. And I think just because I used to eat till I hurt almost every single time, I felt good, like just taking all that weight and pressure off of my system. But it was winter time in London, and I was working and I was modeling there. And then some of Joe's friends that I knew from the nightclub started showing up there. And one of his friends started dating my roommate. And he actually told her that Joe had told him that he was really in love with me and he used to follow me around. And that really shook me up because I was going back and forth, but having such and crazy strong feelings for him and being so put off by him at the same time and not wanting to care. And I was like, what? So that was real, like he really felt that. And then one night I was out at a club, and one of his friends was there. And I was, hanging out at the bar, looking all, trying to have attitude and be all cool because that was my whole big thing. I didn't know how to be myself at all. And he came up to me and started talking to me. And I was giving him attitude, and he called me on it. And he was like, you've really got a chip on your shoulder. I'm not trying to hit on you. I'm just trying to talk to you. And then he said something to me. He said, you act so cool and tough, but he's like, you look like you just really need a hug. And I just blew him off. It's like, whatever, and gave him attitude. And then I went home and I had a nervous breakdown because it was true. I didn't know it was true, but it was true. And I realized at that moment, I didn't know who I was. Like, I had this huge front going on, and he brought it out. He definitely brought it out. So then I started getting on this really perfectionistic trip, thinking that I needed to purify and cleanse myself, thinking I was going to live off of nothing but fruits and nuts, and I was constantly fasting, either on fruit juices or on herbal teas. But I was working. I was getting thinner, which made me actually work better. So I was, I did a magazine cover and some newspaper stuff and catalog stuff, and was going out dancing all the time. And I had another roommate show up who was a brand new American roommate who was just a few years older than me. And we actually started to get close. And that's the thing I realized with the model friends I made there. I think there's something about being out of the country, being out of the normal scene, that you let your walls come down. And I was able to bond with the women I met there in ways I never had friends in the States, not even close. I couldn't be myself. And even though I still didn't know what myself was or how to be myself, I was more myself than ever when I was there. And so this girl, Linda, and we started getting really close. And then one day we decided to tell each other our deepest, darkest secrets. And it was really difficult for me to spit mine out. Mine was that my father was a polygamist. I was so ashamed of it. And when I told her that, she just kind of laughed it off and went, oh, well, my dad's gay. And back then, this is 1986, it was a much bigger deal. And I was like, especially for me being from Utah, I was like, oh my God, oh wow, you poor thing, you really dealt with a lot, and that's really intense, and but we started getting closer from that. And one night we went out to the club again, and one of Joe's friends was there, and he saw me and he grabbed me and he pulled me across the floor of the room and brought me right up to Joe. Joe was there. And it was awkward at first, and then we started talking, and it was just like, oh, like the connection was, it was just unbelievable. And I was so torn, so torn. But we ended up leaving, and we took a taxi back to my place, and somehow we'd gotten locked out. I'd gotten locked out. And so Joe actually climbed, it was wintertime, and Joe climbed the wall in the back, climbed over the roof, opened the window, and got us in. And he ended up staying the night. And again, I was able to not have sex with him, even though we cuddled and made out like crazy and everything. And I didn't ask him about his girlfriend. And I, all I can chalk this up to is 16 years old, desperate for love, feeling the strongest love I've ever felt in my life that I never got from my family. So he stayed the night, and then the next day I was just, but I would never really pour my heart out to him, how much I felt, because I just felt like I didn't want this, but I did. And he left the next day and said, well, yeah, maybe I'll see you in Paris, maybe I'll see you around, kind of thing. And I was sad about that, but at the same time, what was I going to do? So I started getting more and more fanatical on, well, I mean, how much more fanatical can you get on a fruitarian diet? You just eat fruit, but I was really determined, that I was going to cleanse myself, and I was going to be some kind of perfected spiritual being. And I didn't get it at the time what I was doing. It wasn't until later, and you'll hear in later chapters, just how it was a form of anorexia. It was a form of trying to cleanse myself of all the negative emotions I didn't even know I had. I hadn't gotten real about how all the violence affected me and my family. I wasn't clear on that it was wrong, because they blamed me. They put it all on me. And even though I hated my father, there was a part of me that loved him too and needed him. And I was really, it's a survival instinct. I'm sure probably most people know someone who's been in an abusive relationship and they keep going back. And it's just to draw those lines and be really clear about who you are and what you deserve and what's right and what's wrong when it's all you've known. It's pretty difficult. So at the time, I just saw it as I need to be cleaner. I need to clean myself out and be more spiritually perfect. That was the road that I thought that I needed to take. And I went back to Paris. Oh, before I went back to Paris, though, this is when it started. Life started getting good. A friend took me out to a club in Paris called the WAG. And the WAG was an all-black club. Not that you had to be black to get in there, but 99% of the people were. And they played like this funky music that I'd never heard before, from Utah. And the only black music I'd heard was like Michael Jackson, which was, pop. But they were playing this funk music. And when I was there, I'd never even been around black people. It's interesting to be raised as a racist and you're taught to hate people that you've never even met, And when I was in there, I was so blown away. Like the music, it just, that funkiness, it just had this smooth, rounded feelings that I had never experienced. And I was just like, oh, wow. And I remember like the black people in there, big smiles, having so much fun. And I was just like, oh, this is incredible. It blew my mind open. I think when I look back at this now, I think how incredible that I had the opportunity to have zero experience of black people. None. Not of their music, not of their culture, nothing. And then one day have it just plopped in my lap and like some kind of ecstasy pill, like just the contrast between what I had known and what I was presented with was so huge, and it was juicy and it was fun, and it was like, wow, that that was an incredible experience and began to change my life. So then I go back to Paris. My grandmother actually came to visit, and she was I kind of think of it as she dragged me around to all these cathedrals or churches, because I didn't really feel that excited about it, but she was really into history and teaching, and I love that part of her. You know, she did like to educate and explore. Um, so we went to a bunch of the the really old churches and cathedrals that were built, and I don't remember if it was at that time or later. I read that many of these sites where these cathedrals or churches were built were on the top of former pagan ritual sites that the the people that they call pagans, I mean, they're basically, I guess, indigenous people, believed that there was energy circles on the earth there. And so they tore down their sacred sites and put their churches there. The And I can honestly say that every cathedral church, I don't know the difference. They were just massive with lots of really ornate stonework and stained glass. So but everyone that I went to, I was trying to have this spiritual, holy feeling when I went to them, because that's what I wanted. I was trying to connect to something more, and I didn't feel it. They felt creepy and dungeony, and I remember sitting in one of them. I think it was Chartres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that was one of the churches I went to, and it's I remember sitting there going, this is so gloomy and creepy. I feel closer to God by a tree. Like, I would rather go sit under a tree and talk to God than in this place. Didn't move me. I didn't connect. I wasn't into it. So, but I saw a lot of them because of my grandmother. She took me around to see a lot of stuff that I hadn't bothered to go look at. And part of that was my closed-mindedness from growing up in Utah. Like, I wasn't quite so open to learning new cultures, and yeah, there was definitely that. The French people were interesting. They were it was very cold compared to Italy. Italy, the people were so warm and friendly, and, the men really, really sexual. um, but Italy was just a more pretentious place. And especially me being an American, I got treated badly in the beginning when I try and order food, because I spoke very little French. And the funny thing was, after I ended up living in Paris for 2 years, and after a while of living there, I was speaking French very well. And I wasn't fluent, but I had an accent that worked. And I dressed like the French. The French were much more, they didn't curl their hair. They didn't wear all these super bright colors at the time. It was more subdued colors and very classy. And I looked like one of them. And then I even started talking like one of them. And I used to walk around in these tights with a mini skirt, but the tights were, you couldn't see through them. And I remember once I was walking down the road, and there were some Americans. It was tourist season, and they were walking behind me, and they were talking about me in English, and they thought I was French. And they were like, well, I like mini skirts, but not that short. But, hey, I was a model and had to show off the goods. I guess that was part of it, or, part of just being a female. But I got to the point where I could call taxis and they would think I was French, but if I had an American with me, that they wouldn't even want to pick me up. There was a lot of attitude about that. There was also a lot of Arab men that would hit on me when I'd walk up and down the Champs-Elysees, and that really bothered me. It totally creeped me out, because there was a lot of, there was just I really felt like they had an attitude of that they owned women, And there was also a lot of bombs going off when I was there. It was 1986. A lot of bombs from terrorist stuff. I mean, close to me too, and at the airport and things like that. And then there was Joe. So very often I would just be walking down the street in Paris and I would run into him. I'd see him. And a few times I saw him with his girlfriend and I was so upset. And so I told my friend, I just got to get out of town. So we got on a train and we went to Munich, and we got off the train in Munich and we walked to the pension where we're going to stay, and we walk in the door and who's there? Joe with his girlfriend. And he actually, and we didn't know what to say to each other, but he gave me a kiss on the forehead, and I don't remember what happened after that. If we left right away or if we stayed, but I didn't see him again. But that did happen quite often, and I kept trying to stay away from him, and I was so tormented by it. But then I was getting more and more into my fruitarianism. I was losing weight more. I was working more because of it. And to the point where my agency was actually telling me, don't get too skinny. But I was getting more and more depressed. I hated modeling. I hated the makeup. I mean, it was a very cold world. It wasn't family oriented. None of the clients treated you good. You're just a piece of meat, and trying desperately to be pretty and wanted and make money. And so I decided to go on a vacation, and I went on a vacation with this model that we didn't really have a real close relationship. And I was kind of a freak because all he wanted, I was on my fruitarianism thing. And we took a vacation to the Caribbean. And at this point, I'm like, I'm looking for paradise. I want something perfect. I've got money. I can buy perfection. And we showed up there, and there was so much that was really beautiful. It was the island Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, and the fruits I'd never heard of before, and the air and the tropics, all that was great. But there was also, beaches just covered in trash, and I got really depressed over that. I also talked to my parents on the phone while I was there, and my mom was so depressed because I guess they were doing very poorly, and I felt part of the thing, two things helped keep me modeling in Europe when I hated it. One was I was Joe, because just the idea of seeing him again somewhere was like, that was really the main thing. And then there was my family. I felt obligated to make money to help them. And I had money to do whatever I wanted, but I wasn't able to do much more than send them $500 here and there, And I felt like she was laying a big guilt trip on me about not helping them more and sending them more money. And I got really, really depressed. And and this is while I was on my fruitarian diet, and then I binged on like cakes and stuff because I think it was around Easter, and they had a party at the place that we were at. And but one of the other things that happened while I was there is we went out dancing, and the club that we went to, there was all the locals who are Black, and this was my second experience, I guess, with Black people. And there was a lot of Black men there who wanted to dance with me. And they were so sweet and gentlemanly and really good dancers. And it was all new to me. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. This is really fun. And so that was a really transformational experience for this former, Nazi girl to experience and really enjoy. And I've got so much more to tell you, but you have to wait for chapter 5.